Venus and star blessings. Hi, everybody. I hope you're doing well. Haven't seen you all for a couple of weeks. I've just had a birthday, so I've just been kind of doing a little bit of Anastasia time, if you like. Anyway, today I want to talk about the full moon in Scorpio coming up, and I want to talk about some of the surrounding themes connecting to this full moon, which will include a Jupiter-Uranus conjunction, which is the talk of the town, obviously. We're going to touch a little bit on Venus as well, because she is preparing to go into the underworld. There's a conjunction between Mercury North Node. Venus also forms a conjunction to Chiron. There's quite a few different things going on. Mercury is still retrograde during the time of the full moon, but is stationary the following day, stationary direct. And there's an incredible body, asteroid goddess called Pandora, who happens to be conjunct the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction. Now, this Jupiter-Uranus conjunction that I want to talk about today, I'm going to touch on it from the point of view of the full moon and maybe just highlight a few themes. But I do intend on coming back and doing a separate video just for that conjunction alone. But it's hard not to bring it into the full moon transmission, if you like, because it's there, it's present during this full moon. So, okay, so let me start by sharing my screen and just showing you a couple of things. So basically, this is, okay, whoops, that's a little bit too big. This is Rumen Kolev's program. And so here I'm actually looking at, well, quite a few different things. Let me just jump back to, well, we'll keep it on equinox. So you can look at the Babylonian astrology with this. You can look at the tropical zodiac. Today's focus is going to be on the tropical zodiac, however. So what I was looking at here was Venus's invisibility. Where is she? She's there. Okay, so the invisibility and visibility factor of Venus is a huge, huge matter, particularly in ancient astrology. Still doesn't get enough recognition, if you like. It's not talked about enough. I think a lot of people just don't understand it. And furthermore to that, it is very difficult with general sort of programs to determine accurately when she will actually become invisible, because it is based on one's location. Therefore, it's based on latitude. So every latitude is different, right? And so thus Venus's appearance and disappearance varies depending on where you are on Earth. In New York, for example, at the moment, she's already invisible. It actually happened, I think, maybe even a week ago or so. So she's already, begun that journey of her entrance into the underworld. And in Australia, she doesn't actually go invisible until May. I think it's the 14th of May. So you see there's quite a bit of difference. But her invisibility period, generally at this point in time, that is transitioning out of a morning star to an evening star, she will be invisible for around about 3 months. So it's a pretty big deal. Hi, Coco. I think Coco's feeling the full moon energy, and she's saying hello to you all. Look, given just, a thought just came to my mind, I think I will just leave the themes around Venus's invisibility again for a separate video, because it will ultimately be the lead up to the Venus star point, which is the rebirth of Venus, right? She will form a conjunction to the sun and she will be reborn into an evening star. And that's not far away. That's just a couple of months away. But I guess the main takeaway at the moment for people to consider is that she is, she's going through a death passage, literally a death passage, so a transformative passage. And I did mention previously, I don't remember which video it was, this process is really, really powerful for our spiritual alignment, spiritual growth, spiritual development. So it has very little to do with the desires of the material gain of the world, right? It's it is more about dying to old themes or old patterns or old mindsets or old attachments and things like that, and processing that through some sort of spiritual pathway or channel so that you can evolve, essentially. And when she goes through this death passage, she becomes these different goddesses, if you like. So she becomes these different divinities, one of which is Rashkigal, the other one is Ishara, the other one is Proserpina, which is the Roman name for Persephone. They're all deities and goddesses that correspond to the underworld. So whether we are aware of it or not, that's actually what's happening to Venus. But again, I'll leave that for a separate video, and I'll just unpack it in a bit more depth relative to how we can consider that in our personal life and our charts. So the other thing that I want to highlight is the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction, which I'm going to talk about a little bit today, is, as I said, it is conjunct an asteroid called Pandora. Now, most of you perhaps are aware of who Pandora was. She was originally a human being, a mortal, and then she later became a divinity of some kind, a goddess. But I found a really interesting short little article that I feel is worth mentioning some of the points about that, because I learned something new through reading this article from the point of view of Pandora. And I'll get to it in a minute, but basically she's got a very Uranian type of energy. And I'll explain why when I talk about that. But it is very interesting that she was at 20 degrees of Taurus when the conjunction occurred between Uranus and Jupiter. And so the conjunction occurred at 21 Taurus, right? Tropical zodiac. So that's a very, very close conjunction. Further to that, with the Uranus-Jupiter conjunction, this conjunction occurs in the terms of Jupiter. Now, that's a very positive omen, actually, because it is a conjunction with the two sky gods, two very, very powerful planets. I suppose I might as well continue with this and get to the full moon in a moment, since I've started here. So the two sky gods, both connecting to the sky in different ways. Of course, Uranus was was part of creation, if you like, with Gaia, which is Earth. Just looking at their myths is really, really interesting, because, both these planets do connect to freedom in some kind of way, in big ways, actually. Jupiter is the one that has no boundaries, no limits, and, has this urge to grow and expand. And Uranus, of course, is the liberator. There's a really interesting backstory with Pandora, which I perhaps will just go to now. So most of you would know the term Pandora's box, which comes from this particular deity who was originally a mortal. She was given this box, and it's quite a complex story. There's a few characters involved. Pallas Athena was involved, Zeus was involved, and Hermes, Mercury, was involved as well in the creation of this box. And when it was given to her, she was strictly told to not open it, right? And at this point, she was very innocent and very naive. In fact, her role before she was advanced to being a deity, she was a person who just looked after animals, actually. She fed the animals, essentially, on the earth. She was very innocent and very pure. And when she was given this box, which, as I said, had all these characters involved, Pallas Athena, Hermes, Mercury, Venus, and Zeus, Jupiter, and she was told not to open the box out of her own curiosity. And that's one of the key themes about Pandora, is this curiosity that human beings have, right? Which is a natural thing, and often a healthy thing as well, but it can have a flip side to that coin. So her innocence and curiosity got the better of her, and she opened the box. And as she opened it, all these really dreadful, terrible things started coming out of it, like sickness and death and betrayal, and, just all the dark kind of elements, if you like, of life. And she was so overwhelmed by what was coming out of this box that she closed it. And just before she closed it, the energy of hope was the last one that was about to come out just as she closed the box. So hope got trapped in there. There's something very important, I think, about that part of the myth. Anyway, moving forward, that resulted into humanity, if you like, subsequently experiencing these darker elements of human existence, and in an unconscious way, how these shadow components can basically be manifested and played out in people's lives in the world and so forth. So she also then speaks to the shadow side of being a human being, right? She was paired up with Epimetheus, which is Uranus's brother, twin brother. And it's interesting because Uranus means forethought, right? Or foresight, so seeing into the future, right? And Epimetheus is afterthought, literally means afterthought. And so that's very symbolic because she basically opened the box that had all these dark things that were going to doom humanity, as it were. And it wasn't until, the afterthought that she realized, well, shit, I better close this box. This is absolute horrendous hell, what's coming out. So you see, it was afterthought that she realized that. So it's not a coincidence that she was paired up with Epimetheus. She was married to him. However, some of the key points that this individual makes, which I really like, which I'd never heard before, which I think are worth considering anyway. She says that astrologically, Pandora indicates our affinity or predisposition for innovation. Now, Uranus is innovation, right? And here we have Uranus conjunct Jupiter and this goddess that also corresponds to innovation, right? So it's layers just keep getting, built up with this energy. Where am I? For unexpected discovery and for controversy. So unexpected discovery, of course, and controversy as well also corresponds to Uranus. So she has a really Uranian edge to her, obviously, is what we're seeing here. She also says it indicates possible resistance to change, and in brackets, and how it occurs. Now, again, that's a Uranian thing. The resistance, of course, is Saturn. And Saturn did castrate Uranus because Uranus was wild, free, and he stole the fire from the gods and gave it to humanity and was punished for that. So what's the fire? The fire is consciousness, right? Waking people up. So Uranus has this energy where it wakes us up out of our deep slumber, out of our comfort zone, out of our so-called securities that basically stagnate our growth, right? So she has this kind of energy about her as well. And when she shows up, it can indicate our resistance to change. That's basically what that statement was saying. She can also show us where and in what way we express our deepest, if rebellious, curiosity. So again, pretty much every word I'm hearing here describing Pandora is virtually the same as describing the Uranus energy, which is why I decided to speak on this, because I've never heard anybody else speak on it so far. Number one, because I am an asteroid astrologer amongst other types of levels of astrology, I do pay attention to the asteroids because I know their power, and have known and have observed for many, many years. She also says that if and how we connect with concealing things, it may indicate a malicious nature which seeks to agitate the rotten peace in order to trigger transmutative processes essential to evolution. So once again, that's what Uranus does as well. It shakes the status quo. It shakes the foundations that we build, that we hang on to, that we become very attached to, because hanging on to things for too long doesn't really serve in our path of evolution and growth. So Uranus will come along and will shake that ground that we stand on, as it were, and we'll create cracks and unexpected things, shocks and shock waves, and whether that's emotionally, mentally, physically, or spiritually, in order to propel us into a new direction, because we are remaining stagnant if we don't do that. And she is also speaking to this as well. And finally, she says, indicates how we conduct and support creative processes as well. So some really interesting statements that we could, consider and think about. First of all, from a bigger picture level, because this cycle, the Uranus-Jupiter conjunction, is a 14-year cycle. It is a conjunction. First of all, let's talk about what is a conjunction. A conjunction contains all possibilities. So everyone's trying to predict what this, conjunction is going to bring to us. And there are some clues for sure, because if we understand the symbolic language and the sacred language of astrology, God's language, the goddess language, we understand that these symbols have very specific significators. So of course, Taurus corresponds to money, it corresponds to the land, it corresponds to food, it corresponds to our body, it corresponds to survival. So all these matters are going to be themes that will be impacted clearly by this conjunction. To what extent and when exactly that's going to start and how fast we're going to see it, nobody really knows. That's the truth, because this is a 14-year cycle. So it means that it is unfolding over 14 years, and a conjunction, as I said, contains all possibilities, which means anything can happen at any moment. And that is the nature of Uranus. You cannot predict with a planet that corresponds to unpredictability. So I just thought that it was very interesting to see Pandora being there aligned with this particular conjunction. And also, as I said, the conjunction occurs in the terms of Jupiter. Terms in ancient astrology are a really powerful principle, because they really they help or inflict the planet, in different ways, right? It's being held, if you like, by that energy, and in this case, it's being held by the energy of Jupiter, and it is a Jupiter-Uranus conjunction, so that's favorable. I wouldn't have liked to have seen it in the terms of Saturn, for instance, right? Because Saturn, regardless of how wonderful it is in so many different ways, it really does come down to restrictions. So this is telling us that in the terms of Jupiter, that promise of this benefic, being Jupiter, relative to growth and expansion, is really amplified by being in the terms of Jupiter, this particular conjunction. Now, Uranus, of course, is also the planet that corresponds to what is called individuation, which was coined by Carl Jung, and has been integrated heavily in the body of work of evolutionary astrology by Jeff Wolf Green. And his definition of individuation is more or less the same as Carl Jung's, which is about being authentic, right? Waking up, Uranus, waking up to our own authenticity, whatever that is for us. And that's a process and a journey. So with Uranus as well, because it is an energy that takes us out of the consensus status quo and invites us towards individuation, which is finding our own authentic path, or integrating further into that, or realizing more things about ourselves in a very authentic way, and living up to that, living into that, and living with that, and expressing that and being that, right? And Jupiter, of course, is a planet that corresponds to confidence, alongside many other different things. But, with Jupiter there is a sense of confidence and support, because Jupiter is what supports us as well. It supports our path in growth and expanding ourselves, right? Beyond the little self, if you like. So there's lots of different possibilities, all of which are predominantly really positive. But Uranus, it does have the shock factor, and in evolutionary astrology, it does have a trauma factor associated to it as well. The trauma is very complex. I'm not going to go into that right now, but I guess if we just think about it from the point of view of Uranus brings up shocks because it brings up the unexpected, sometimes that experience can be quite traumatic, right? Just to put it very simply, it's not always an easy, wave to ride. It strips you back of what you thought provided you security, what made you feel comfortable and safe. It strips that back, and initially that can be really overwhelming and very traumatic because it can manifest in numerous different ways. For example, when Uranus got to my 4th house and came to conjunct my sun, that was the time where my father transcended, for example, right? So whilst that subsequently led to really profound changes in my own life in a very Uranian way, which ultimately ended up being really great, which included me creating this YouTube channel, for instance, that initial shock and trauma of my father leaving this world, that took years to overcome, and I'm still not over it. But my point is that the shock of that was very severe for me. So I'm using that as an example because these are the sorts of things that can come up with Uranus. Sudden, unexpected, events can take place that can be quite traumatic. So there is that side to it as well that we need to perhaps at least be aware of, but just remember that the light at the end of the tunnel of the Uranian experience is the sense of liberation and freedom that comes out of the experiences that initially might feel quite traumatic or quite shocking, right? I think the other factor that I want to address here that's really important as well, which again hardly ever gets mentioned, certainly not in mainstream astrology. In ancient astrology, it does so. And this is what I'm talking about. Taurus, the sign Taurus, which is where this conjunction occurred. When you look at Taurus in a very basic way, it is a very basic sign in a lot of ways. And if you look at it in a mainstream way, the perspective on it is very limiting and kind of holds this position where Taurus is not a difficult sign. And the opposite is actually true. Taurus is actually quite a difficult sign because it sits opposite Scorpio, first of all. Second of all, in ancient astrology, the 2nd house is called the gates of Hades. And all I want to say about that is that here's the thing. This is probably the best quote that will encapsulate this point about Taurus and how we can think about it. And the quote is this: there's more than enough in the world, on the earth, for everyone's needs, but there simply is not enough for everyone's greed. So that quote actually nails it when it comes to Taurus, because Taurus is the earth, and the earth herself has no shortage for us. She is always nourishing us, nourishing our body. She's nourishing the earth. She's always providing for us. There's more than enough. There is no question of that. So that shows us then how true this statement is, because there is more than enough for everyone's needs. But when you start to bring in the element of greed, which is more alongside the personality, well, then the element of greed is what brings up the problems, hence the 2nd house Taurus being referred to as the gates of Hades. It takes us into the gates of Hades, matters of control come through that zone, if you like, power, control, and so forth. And that is evident in our world and has been for thousands of years. There's a minority that have the most, and there's a majority that have very little. That's not a new thing. It's been going on for a long time, but this is where it comes from. So I think it's just important to have that in the back of our minds when it comes to this conjunction in Taurus, because I think perhaps a lot of people are maybe focusing very much on the material, monetary kind of level of it. It is going to speak to the system of money for sure, right? Because Taurus corresponds to the material plane, right? Including money, of course, which is an illusion, but it is something that is identified and classed as something that we exchange with each other in order to have this or have that, right? It's just a system. That's all it is, that people are attached to and trapped by as well. So I'd like us perhaps to, go beyond that and expand, right? Really expand our own mind, our higher mind, Uranus, because Uranus corresponds to your right brain intuition. It's not the left brain linear mind that connects the dots, that makes decisions, that thinks about this, thinks about that on a daily basis. We're talking about right brain intuition. We're talking about innovative energy. We're talking about, going beyond the appearances, going beyond the apparent limitations, and I suppose really stepping into the unknown, as Jeffrey Wolf Green calls it. And to step into the unknown, you have to let go. You can't hold on and step into the unknown. It just doesn't work like that. So it's a very challenging invitation towards, just letting go and trusting that path in front of us that is very uncertain, that is very unknown, and we can only do that in bits and pieces. We can't totally and utterly and completely do that because of the structure of this consensus reality, but we can do it in bits and pieces. And sometimes we have leaps and bounds, in our process of growth and evolution and development because of the passages that happen in our lives, such as planets. So when a planet is retrograde in your chart neatly, that's an indication that you are working with that energy in a more fast-tracked manner, from an evolutionary perspective. You're not relying on the external reality, consensus reality, to inform you of X, Y, Z, depending on the nature of what that planet represents. So you're figuring it out yourself, in other words, And Uranus is very much like that as well. We have to let go of the structures and the attachments that we have integrated around us and within us to explore territory and a field that is unknown to us. We can't take this little prison that we've created right into this world. We have to, set ourselves free and go into an unknown territory. So there's a lot of possibilities and a lot of uncertainties and a lot of unknowns, but it is a very exciting and exhilarating energy because it does have, unlimited possibilities, and it has very strong promise because of what these two planets represent, essentially. Breakthroughs, of course, is another thing that comes through with the energy of Uranus, sudden innovative breakthroughs, whether that's in our own personal life, depending on where this conjunction is occurring in our birth chart. It might be connecting to other planets in our charts. For me, it's trine my Mars. I'm pretty happy with that, actually, and some other interesting aspects as well. So think about where this conjunction is occurring in your chart and what aspects it has to other planets in your own chart, and particularly, when it's aspecting a personal planet, that's going to be a very personal integration, a very personal experience. That's what the personal planets are. They are our personal living and embodied experience on a day-to-day basis, viscerally, spiritually, emotionally, psychologically, and so forth. When it comes to the transpersonal planets, which includes Uranus, that field is very unknown to us in a lot of ways relative to this physical dimension, because they are transpersonal, right? And we have moments and experiences with those divinities and with those portals and with those transits in different ways. But fundamentally, on a day-to-day basis, we are really operating through the personal planets. So when you have Jupiter, Uranus, forming a personal aspect, rather an aspect to one of your personal planets, that's likely to be quite impactful, So I imagine, all you Taurians that have Taurus sun at, 20, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25 degrees, this is going to be important for you. All those of you with your personal planets in Scorpio, opposition or square, I'd look at, probably most aspects actually, and consider that. What else did I want to say? I think the money systems matter is going to be, yeah, it's really hard, I think, to predict exactly what that's going to be, but we can see that there's been this development in the last few years, trying to push into a particular direction, right? And where that will arrive exactly and what that will look like, I don't think we really know. I think it's probably going to be very, it will be just a very unusual way of life, I think, relative to money systems and things like that. I mean, it's obvious that they're trying to delete, money, material money. Even just here in my area where I live, like right near the city, pretty much, and there's hardly any banks around. There's hardly any ATM machines around, and you go to an ATM machine and it doesn't work. You go to the supermarket to withdraw money and they say, no, we don't allow you to withdraw money, or they have this cap on it, this limit. They're trying to deter people from having cash on them. That's obvious, right? This has been building for a while. So let's see what's going to happen. I think it's going to be very, very interesting, whichever way it goes. But I think it's going to speak to, really unusual, revelational ways that speak to how we deal with food and money and survival, actually. And there'll be, there'll be amazing innovations that will come through this, things that we just never, on a left brain Gemini level, we never sort of thought about. But I believe that anything that is manifested has already been imagined somewhere along the line. So it's going to be very interesting. And because Uranus in Taurus, which, it's been there for a few years now, hasn't it? Tropical zodiac. And Uranus changes signs every 7 years. So we can see that, it's not too far away before it moves into Gemini. So Uranus in Taurus has been pretty difficult, in my opinion. I'd be curious to hear yours, because it has created this very unstable economy collectively in different ways. It has created unstable housing. For example, there's a lot more homeless people since Taurus went into Uranus. I was hoping that Taurus and Uranus was going to even out or balance out a little bit, the high end of entities and people having more, and the majority of having less, but it doesn't seem to have really balanced it out at all. In fact, it's become more severe in its extremity. There's a lot more homeless people now, for instance. There's a lot more people heading to homelessness. There's a lot more people applying for public housing. There's heaps of people here in Australia, in Melbourne. I'm sure this is happening worldwide. In the last 3-4 years, have not been able to keep up their mortgage payments, so everyone's trying to sell their property. It's just chaos, basically. So let's hold on to some hope, because Jupiter is a planet of hope and faith, and fortune and possibilities and expansion, and it is a benefic planet. So maybe this Jupiter catching up to Uranus and forming this conjunction will hopefully turn things around for us. And I feel it will. It's not going to be maybe to the extent that we want it to, because nothing so dramatic can shift overnight, or even in 14 years for that matter. These large shifts take longer periods of time, but this could be a real catalyst, I feel, for this new innovative change, and more beneficial to humanity as well. And, you know, it is happening in the terms of Jupiter. So I guess in a nutshell, that's most of what I think about this conjunction. There are probably some other things, but I do want to get onto the full moon before I completely forget about her. So here's the full moon in tropical zodiac, just going back to the normal charts that we look at, which is much easier to read, I admit. But there's, you know, in this chart here, you've got so many things to consider, but you've got to understand it as well. But very simply, you know, you've got, even if I remove these terms, you've got the constellations in the background. You've got the signs of the zodiac. You've got hundreds of stars. You've got that's the ecliptic, that yellow circle. You know, so this is a three-dimensional chart. It's very, very different. Okay, going back to this. So full moon in Scorpio. Well, this is running off the back of what? Solar eclipse, right? That almighty, powerful, total solar eclipse, which was visible in certain parts of the Northern Hemisphere, which I think has been, well, it's you know, it's some terrible things have come out of it already, you know, relative to violence and killing, and, you know, really dark things, really terrible things have happened in a lot of places on the earth. And we've got 2 wars, you know, there's more than that actually, but there's 2 main ones that are, you know, focused on, if you like. They're still going full ball. So there's a lot of difficult things in the background taking place. And keep in mind that total solar eclipse, which was for 4.5 minutes, equates to 4.5 years in terms of what that will unravel. So there's a lot, even with that we don't know. But coming back to the present moment, because if we focus too much on these bigger picture things, it's good to be aware of them. But if we dwell on them, I think that will just raise our anxiety, because we don't have the answers. We don't know what's going to come. That's what raises anxiety, the not knowing, you know. So the energy of Taurus, of course, which is where the sun is now, one of the greatest things about Taurus, of course, quite apart from the dark side, which is totally and utterly all about greed. That's what the dark side of Taurus is. The more light side, if you like, just to use simple language, because both light and dark exist here in the one, in everything. They're not separate. But let's just say the more positive side of Taurus is that invitation towards grounding ourselves, right? Grounding our body, grounding our emotional body, our spiritual body, our mental body, everything. You know, it helps us relax. You know, calming our central nervous system down is a very powerful, you know, embodied experience to practice every single day, because the shape of the world is so uncertain, and it's, you know, there's so many waves of things going on daily that are they're not small things, they're big things that affect us in huge ways. And so the whole world is feeling a level of anxiety to some extent. And for that reason, you know, we should be practicing different things and different methods to help us, you know, calm down and center ourselves and calm our central nervous system down. And, you know, in my opinion, 2 of the best ways to do that is yoga and meditation. Well, yoga is meditation, but there's 2 forms of it. One yoga practice has got to do with quietening the mind, and the other practice has got to do with working on the physical body through different asanas. Again, that helps the body relax, but it also helps the mind relax. So they work hand in hand, don't they? And you don't have to be, you know, a professional yogi to do these things. Anyone can practice yoga. Anyone can learn how to meditate. Anyone can learn how to do some basic stretches. And the reward, the payoff is, it's just a lot more worth it than you'd realize, but it's a discipline, and so just like anything, when we want to cultivate it and develop it and expand it, we have to be disciplined, that's what it comes down to. So this full moon, off the back of the total solar eclipse, the solar eclipse was ruled by Mars because it was in Aries, conjunct Chiron, and this lunar I was going to say lunar eclipse. It's not a lunar eclipse. This full moon is also ruled by Mars, okay? But it's ruled by Pluto as well. And because Scorpio has two rulers, and what do we see going on here? We see, just grab something. So, there's the moon, the sun, Scorpio, and look at Pluto, 2 degrees. So we're talking about a T-squared to Pluto. Full moon squaring Pluto, and Pluto is one of the rulers of Scorpio. So look, let's be honest, this is not an easy energy. To say this is easy is, I don't know what it is, but in my opinion, this is not an easy energy. I think because we're still riding the energy of the solar eclipse, there's a lot of volatile energy inside us, in the ether, on the earth, with events, lots of things going on, lots of difficult things going on. But, when you see Pluto in the picture, it is obviously going to speak to some type of purging, and moon in Scorpio can be a purging thing as well. Purging, what? Emotional crap, emotional debris, releasing some pretty intense emotions as well. It's important to release things. I heard someone say just yesterday, which I thought, that's like amazing, and I know it's true because I've always known that this particular herb works for teeth. So basically, what's it called in English? I've just forgotten what it's called in English. Cloves, thank you. Thanks. So cloves, which are things that, it's a herb, or I suppose it's a herb that, a lot of cuisines, traditions around the world use in their food. As Greeks, we use it a lot as well. I know Indians use it, and so on and so forth. Well, anyway, when you've got, pain in your teeth, clove oil is really, really effective for that, right? In case you didn't know. And I heard this guy say the other day that when your teeth have a lot of cavities, or when you have a lot of, problems with your teeth, whether it's you're losing teeth, or just, you could have gingivitis, you could have, there's numerous things that can be happening in one's mouth, right, relative to teeth. But let's just say problems with teeth. First of all, clove oil is unbelievable for that. But what I did was I had created this clove liquid thing actually quite a few months ago for a different purpose. But when I heard this guy talk about the power of clove in this way, I thought, okay, so I'm going to use it in this way. So basically what I did was I just got a handful of cloves, and I've just put them in a little tincture bottle and filled it up with filtered clean water, and just let it sit there for about a week or so. So the water becomes like this dark, sort of almost looks like a rusty sort of color, because it's, extracting from the clove. Well, that is a remedy that you can use as a mouthwash, for example. You could even use that on your hair, by the way, as to help strengthen hair. But it's very, very good for an oral mouthwash, which basically can help heal cavities in your teeth. But here's what I was going to get to. He correlated the problems and cavities that occur in a person's mouth with having had a lot of perhaps trauma or difficult emotional experiences in life, where the person has suppressed the emotional difficulty, and they're not able to deal with it because it's just so painful. And so they've suppressed it, and that internalization that has suppressed that emotional energy just comes out and into the mouth. So the mouth and the teeth have a very strong correlation to emotional energy that is not being allowed to be released by our own doing. So just something to consider if you didn't know that or hadn't thought about that. And whether you believe that or not is up to you. But relative to the clove mouthwash, even if you had like bad breath issues, because a lot of people do, you know, that would clear it up like that as well. So it's very, very effective. Now, why is all that important? Because this moon is in Scorpio, and it talks about emotional purging, emotional release, deep, intense emotions that may be troubling. They may be causing you some really deep pain, some really intense experiences, you know, feeling sort of annoyed or bothered or pissed off at things, and just there's some really deep feelings surrounding that, and maybe you're not sure what it's connected to, you know, maybe you are. Whatever it is, I think with a full moon in Scorpio square Pluto, we must go through some little mini death passage, emotional release, purge, clearing. Now, remember, the full moon is describing a cycle that began at the new moon, which began at the total solar eclipse, right? And then in 2 weeks' time, this full moon in Scorpio is going to come back to being a new moon again. So the full moon point can be a period of illumination. And because that's a word that loosely gets thrown around, and it's such a powerful word, let's use the word awareness, which is more of a word that we can relate to on a day-to-day basis, you know. A full moon can make us more aware of things, right? That's you know, the energy that it holds, because it lights things up. So this is a full moon bringing perhaps some awareness to us about certain feelings and or patterns of feelings of things that we're still maybe holding on to that are not healthy, either for ourselves or for others. Usually it's going to be both anyway, because if we're holding on to unhealthy, toxic feelings in ourselves, that is going to somehow engage and interact with others as well, isn't it? Just goes hand in hand. So with the square to Pluto, there can be, you know, just a really intense purging moment, if you like, a couple of days there. But I guess the thing to note and be aware of is that it can bring up something that, you know, we're out of touch with, not really conscious of, not really aware of, right? Because the moon being full is bringing energy from where it started, which was the total solar eclipse in Aries, conjunct Chiron. So you might see that if we just compress it back to just the monthly cycle, quite apart from the fact that that solar eclipse speaks of the next 4.5 years, let's just bring it back to this monthly cycle. This monthly cycle started relative to the sun-moon relationship with a total solar eclipse in Aries conjunct Chiron. That's pretty obvious that it's going to be a pretty volatile, intense month with our own emotions. And I suppose the benefit of this and the potential that we can take from this is to see how much we are emotionally clean, or how much we have grown on something, some emotional part of us. You know, it could be a relationship that you're having, or it could be a relationship with a family member. You know, it's going to have a connection to something or someone, you know, because our emotional reactions or responses to things or to people, right, connect to something, don't they? So this is I see it as a really powerful death cleansing portal, if you like, within our own self. Right, that's, you know, very simply how I see it. And also here we have Mercury conjunct North Node. Mercury stations direct tomorrow, I think. So just after the full moon. So Mercury, let me just see something. Because at the moment, it's 1 degree away from the North Node. Look at that. Yeah, wow. So it doesn't get to the exact conjunction with the North Node because it stations at the 59th minute. Yeah, but it's within half a degree of orb, let's say. So Mercury, when it went retrograde, you know, in the last, it's been retrograde for the last 3.5 weeks, right? It stations direct on the North Node. So that's worthy of thinking about as well in terms of your own birth chart and where this North Node is, because this North Node in Aries, again, that's speaking to your own personal identity and the future you are working towards as well. Mercury, don't forget, corresponds to siblings. So there might be themes that have come up with siblings at this time. And also because Mercury was conjunct Chiron, and as it proceeds forward again, when it stations direct just after the day of the full moon, it's going to catch up to Chiron again. So there's some healing, some necessary healing with either how we use language ourselves, with our own thought processes, or with particular siblings or sibling. I have no doubt that that's going to pop up in a lot of people's lives. It has in my own, actually. Been very, very interesting. Then we have Venus, who, you know, just a couple of days before this, she was conjunct Chiron. So there's another, you know, short passage, but important because it's Venus. Venus in Aries, you know, sure, she's the warrior goddess, she's the fighter. She has all these great qualities in Aries, you know, you could say, fiercely sort of independent and things like that. But don't forget, Venus is about connecting, sharing, and love, right? So Venus in Aries is a bit of a mismatch for Lady Venus there. Think about it. Venus rules Libra, the opposite sign to Aries. So, you know, Venus in Aries is in detriment, basically. You know, Venus in Aries in detriment, and having gone invisible already, I think that's probably brought up some issues in relationships for people. Now, her passage being conjunct Chiron a couple of days ago, that could have been, you know, the catalyst or an activation of, again, focused on matters connecting to healing, right? Whether it's your own heart. We always need to work on healing our own heart. I don't think that journey really comes to an end, as it were. So these beautiful little portals that pop up, they just, they bring that energy closer to us and they show us the way to do it, you see. So Venus conjunct Aries, really, I think that's a beautiful passage for self-love, you know, Aries, self-love, Venus, love, and Chiron, healing, you know, healing more of our own heart. Because the more we can heal our own heart, the more we can have healing or healed relationships with others. Our heart can be healed and aligned with another person's heart from a more pure position, right? So that's how I see these energies inviting us into something more beneficial for us. What else have we got here? And of course, you know, during this full moon, the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction was exact just a few days, just a couple of days. Let's see. So 3 days before the full moon, the Uranus-Jupiter conjunction occurred. So that energy of Jupiter-Uranus is most certainly, you know, incredibly raw, you know, really just alive, you know, at the moment, right? And in this full moon. So let's see, what else did I have here? Mars is approaching Neptune. that's within orb there. So we could say that's within orb during the full moon. Look, honestly, Mars Neptune at the highest level, it can be, you know, giving to somebody in need, for example, sacrificing something in order to help a cause or an individual or a group or a purpose or something like that. Or just being more of an initiative in our own spiritual pathway, having the courage to be more of an initiate in our own, you know, spiritual journey. This is all the Neptune Pisces energy, of course. But the flip side to that coin, Mars Neptune, almost always equates to deceptive actions. So however that's going to play out, that remains to be seen, because that's going to be a different thing on a collective level and different thing for us individually. This aspect perfects around about here. Let's see. Get it to exactness. Or yeah, there it is there. 28, 50, 52, 53. So that's what? That's the 29th of April. You know, so the day before that, and that particular day, 29th of April, and perhaps even the subsequent day. Yeah, definitely the subsequent day. Just, you know, just be mindful, be aware. Yeah, like I can explain it in this way as well, just in a very simple way. You might go to, maybe you're looking for something and you find somebody selling it online and you think, perfect, that's what I've been looking for. Just be careful, because this, you know, it can literally manifest in these ways as well. You know, just the deal you're getting is not the deal you thought it was, right? Simple things like that can sometimes save you a lot of heartache, right? Just being mindful on those days with the interaction and exchanges you're having with people, because it can very well be that somebody's intentions are not actually transparent. Sometimes it can be that they are being dishonest, and other times it can be that we are just simply blindsided because we are not seeing it through clear eyes. We are seeing it through blurred vision. Neptune. So that's just something to be mindful of. Okay, so I think, yes, we will stop it here for today. And I will come back to talk about Venus going into her underworld passage, because it's already happened in certain parts of America anyway. But as I said, here in Australia, it doesn't happen till May 14th. So we've still got a couple of weeks before she disappears for us. And I want to think a little bit more about the Uranus Jupiter conjunction. But I think, honestly, I think that the main kind of points that I wanted to make, I've really made today, because the conjunction to Pandora, I feel, is very, very significant. And whilst it you know, in one level, that myth does hold some doom and gloom, it also holds another side to the story as well, which is about stepping into the unknown, which is about, you know, facing our own shadow stuff, which is about all those things that I mentioned at the very at the very beginning. And also Jupiter, Uranus being in the terms, the conjunction occurred in terms of Jupiter, you know, that's really, really promising. I just did a class on Jupiter and Saturn last week, and I highly recommend it. It doesn't matter if you've been practicing astrology for ages. It's an awesome class. It goes for about 4 hours, and we look at both Saturn and Jupiter from a traditional evolutionary Babylonian level. And you know, there's and some mythology comes into it as well, and it's just a really great class to kind of put you in sync with those two divinities in lots of different ways that maybe you hadn't considered before. But you know, we could talk about Jupiter for hours. There's so many incredible things about Jupiter, and especially in Babylonian astrology. You know, Jupiter wore has this energy which is called it's like a white star, and Saturn has a black star and things like that. Saturn connects to black star, Jupiter connects to white star, Saturn connects to a black crown, and Jupiter connects to a white crown. You know, these are all really important details that come from ancient astrology. So in other words, just from that difference between those two planets that I just mentioned now, we know Jupiter holds that the white crown. It's the light, you know, it's the white star. You know, Jupiter is ultimately filled with promise. The only downside to Jupiter really is, you know, being over extravagant and overdoing it, and perhaps being sloppy with things and things like that. And yeah, sometimes that can be detrimental in different ways, but you know, it's not an energy that stifles or snuffs life out of things. It's the opposite. It gives life. And so Jupiter is with Uranus, the one who liberates us and sets us free and encourages us to be more true and authentic with ourselves. So this is the next 14-year cycle in the archetype sign of Taurus, which is about our own worth and value at the end of the day, isn't it? So look, I think I will come back and give some more considered points about the conjunction Jupiter-Uranus, but for now I'll leave it there, and I'll send you all a lot of love and happy full moon. And happy full moon sounds funny with a full moon in Scorpio square Pluto. Well, I just hope that the energy is one that you can, you know, really work with in a way that's going to just assist you in your path, wherever you may be right now. See you all very soon.